So this is quiz number 11. Number 1, true or false, reading a file that doesn't exist will behave like the file exists and is empty. So key parts here. Reading a file that doesn't exist will behave as though it exists and is empty. This is not the case. Remember that when reading a file, it has to exist first before you can do anything else. That makes this answer false. True or false, every call to dot write also writes a new line at the end. That is false. All right, you have to include the new lines in the string you're trying to write. Otherwise, Python does not enter them as you would expect, like the print function does. True or false, each call to dot write overwrites the previous contents of the file. This one is also false. This is a special case. Remember that you have to have opened up the file in specifically W mode in order for this to, for every call to dot write to overwrite the previous contents. If you were to change this to A mode for append, then every call to dot write actually wouldn't overwrite the previous contents of the file. It would append to the end instead. For these next problems, I'm going to blow up the example on the right just so that I can draw on it a little bit easier. So given this file, what's printed by this code? First things first is we opened up this file for reading. Remember, opened up with no extra arguments means we're in read mode, so that's okay. Our next line is print f.readLine. So f.readLine will read the file all the way up until it reaches the end of line marker, or that \n character. So the question is, where do we start? Well, we haven't done any reading yet, so our file is currently at the beginning. So what we're going to do is we're going to take every single character from here forward. That means this one call to read line grabs everything in this line, including this \n character that's right there. So our first print is going to be everything in this line, line 1. Okay. And this new line character that's on the end will get printed, but you won't see it. You'll see it in the next print. Right? This next print is another call to f.readLine. Where did we leave off with reading? Right here. So let's read this line, grab every single character, including that new line that's on the end. Our new line means that we're done. So print out what happens. We get the word second. And there's a new line character there as well. Right, so what you would see is some extra new lines being printed. So for this next question, we're doing the same thing. We're reading this file. This time we have some different calls to read. So remember, there's this idea of the bookmark, right? As you are reading a file, our bookmark remembers where it is inside this file. So even if you don't save the result of a read, the reading has still happened. The bookmark is still advanced through the file a certain number of times. Remember, whenever I call read with a number in it, this means we're advancing this bookmark this number of characters. Okay, so this bookmark starts at the beginning of our file because we just opened it. The next call is to f.read4. That means read 4 characters. Bookmark advances 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Okay, the next call to .read is 5 characters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, remember, we include spaces and new lines as a single character. So our bookmark right now is currently just after the new line at the end of line 1 and starting at the beginning of this second line. So when we do s equals f.read2, we read 2 characters, 1, 2, read 2 characters, se. Our bookmark is just after the e but before the c. S gets the result of this read. So S is going to store the string SE. That means that we print SE. Okay, for question 6, we've opened the file just as we have been in read mode. The next thing we're doing is we're printing the length of f.readLines. Remember that .readLines reads the entire file and gives you back a list containing every single line inside of the file. And so every time it encounters a new line character, it's going to split off that line into another entry in this list. So the question is, how many times or how many lines are there in this file? There is the first one, second, third, fourth, right? We have an empty line, still has a new line in it. So there's still something that has to be read, and then 5. So the length of this list is going to be 5. That's what we print out. Right? And so this list is going to look something along the lines of this. Line 1, with a new line, then second, with a new line, so on and so forth. Right, so the question is, what happens when you reach this third line? We're calling f.readLines again, and so your first inclination might be, oh, this should just say 5 again. That's not the case. Okay, so remember that we will have already read all of this stuff. All this stuff will already be read. That bookmark only passes through the file one time. So the bookmark, while it may start at the beginning, it's always going to end up at the end. Any successive calls to read after reading or advancing through the whole file will result in nothing. Right? So f.readLines, after having already read one time, that result is actually going to be an empty list. Right? You get nothing. So this length is actually 0. So you see 5 and 0 printed when you run this code. Okay, so for these last 2 questions, which of the following descriptions of what file.readLine 4 will do is the most accurate? Remember that read line with a number says, let's read this number of characters and if you encounter a new line, stop your reading. So that means if you encounter a new line before you've read that number of characters, you might have a string that is a little bit shorter than you expect. So let's see which one of these A, B, C, or D lines up with that. Read the 4th line of a file. No. All right, that doesn't line up. Read up to 4 characters on the current line. Yeah, that's a contender. It's a contender. Read 4 lines, crash if there's not enough content. No, that doesn't make any sense. Read 4 lines, return a short list if there are less than 4 lines available. No, that doesn't make sense given the context of what this function does. So the only right answer has got to be B. Now for number 8, complete the file sum function. Okay, accepts the file name as a string, opens up that file, reads in the integers, returns their sum. Okay, an assumption we can make is every line has an integer and a new line character on it. That makes things pretty easy. Nothing to validate or anything like that. So let's get going. So what we want to do is first open up our file for reading because we only get the file name. So let's make a file, open it up. What are we opening? This is its name. And I don't have to do anything else because all I'm going to do is be reading this file. I can use the default mode of read to my advantage. So now I have to loop through this file and find all the integers, compute their sum. So now I'm going to be computing a sum. So let's kick off a total variable at 0. And let's loop through this file. So a couple ways you can do it. One way you can do it is using read lines. So let's go for every line in file.readLines. So remember, file.readLines will give me a list of all the lines in the file, which means every single line inside this loop will be one unique line in the file. So what are we going to do for every single line in the file? Well, up here at the top it says I should read them in. They're integers. Well, the lines in the file aren't integers yet. I have to turn them into integers. So let's create a number by calling the int function on this line. Right, so num is going to store the integer, actual number that I can do math with, based on the line. Now let's take this number and add it into the total. So total plus equals this number. That way, for every single line in this file, we're going to turn it into an integer. We're going to add it to our running sum. So at the very end of this loop, my total is going to be the sum of all the numbers in the list. So it says we should return this sum. Now, be very careful. Before you return anytime you're working with a file, you have to close. Okay, so close your file up, practice good hygiene, and then finally return this computed total, the sum of all the numbers in this list, in this file. Cool.